Why do you think it's so easy for people to be undisciplined with finances?
So easy for people to be undisciplined with finances. Well, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily easy. I would say right now, that there's a gap, because you have your financial planners and advisors, but they work with people. If you don't have a X amount of money, some of them is $100,000. If you don't have $100,000, you can't even get a meeting with them. But then I'm gonna use this percentage. Pre-pandemic, 78% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck. So it's like, if majority of the people are living in this space where you're living paycheck to paycheck, meaning you don't have a savings, you don't have $100,000. But then there's another 22% that, I'm not even saying that other 22%, even if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, also doesn't mean you still have $100,000. So let's just say there's 10% of people that is getting this knowledge, this education from these financial advisors, where they talk about stock, they talk about CDs, they talk about retirement, and you can get that expertise from them. But there's a larger group that doesn't have access to that type of knowledge. And that's where this came from. We saw that there was a need for, again, 78% of people living paycheck to paycheck. There's definitely a need of knowledge, a need of, there's a lot of tools and resources out there that people are unaware of, and that's where we've been dropping content, kind of exposing and just showing, like she just said, you don't have to be the millionaire to get into these things. But especially with things like YouTube, there's a lot of exposure to tools now, and it's because of the internet. You don't need the financial advisor. You can go do some research yourself, and you can learn about these things and start to try to self-teach yourself. But also, like I said, we're creating content, trying to help those that wouldn't have access to this type of content and everything. And on the other end, you can't remove God and the enemy from it, because God, like we just talked about, God has covered. He wants you to be financially independent. He wants you to be financially free, because I want you to push the gospel.
Which is different, insert Bible, right? Which is different than saying God has said in his word that every Christian is going to be well off and wealthy, right?
Right.
Because you said financially independent, which doesn't necessarily mean you need to be driving a, XYZ.
Right. You can have a $15 per hour job and still have no debt and be considered financially independent. And that's what God has, and like I said, because of the gospel, I want you to don't get tied up in the 9 to 5. Don't get, turn into this work. All I do is work, sleep, because I need your time. I need you to push the gospel. So that's where, on a broad sense, God has already showed us in the Bible that I want you to be financially independent. I don't want you to be a slave to debt. I don't want you to be, those type of things. But then he also comes down to the very specifics of how to save, how to achieve, So God has put that in place. But the enemy, and like we know how the enemy operates, he's going to go and do the complete opposite of what God has put in. So it's like, if God said, I want you to be financially independent, now the enemy, like we know, devices and traps he's going to try to set, he's going to come and try to do the complete opposite. Okay, so in a sense, he's going to try to prevent us from achieving that goal which God has put in place. And by doing such, we run into things where there's no budget. So now money comes in, which God showed us, again, hence to put the man in the garden to manage and keep it. So he showed there's a management aspect that needs to go, even when it comes to your finances. Now the enemy came in and spend everything. When it comes out, don't manage, don't assign money to anything, don't prioritize your savings or take care of your bills, just go spend it out. 1,000 come in, 1,000 go out. But that's not how God has instructed us to handle finances.